Okay, so I'm gonna go over what I'm working on the first steps of the game of life utilizing WX widgets. First, we have to create a new class called main window and use a constructor and destructor, passing in argument in the constructor as well as calling it in the CPP file. As you can see here, we're going to the main window.h. We have a constructor and destructor, and in the CPP file, we do the constructor with the arguments. Uh, you can see that I did a window size of my own, as well as calling it Game of Life for the title, and then an empty destructor for the main window CPP file. Next, we have, now that the window has been created, we have to load it on start, and by that we have to create a main window pointer in the app.h, and there's two items that we have to do on the app on init method in the app.cpp file by instantiating the main window pointer and calling the show method on the pointer, as you can see here in the app.h. I call in the null pointer, and then I have to call it in the CPP file as well. Now we're going to go over the graphics panel. This one we have to create a drawing surface onto which the game will be drawn, and we have to create a new class called drawing panel, include the wx.h in the header, doing a constructor and destructor public on the header file, and then calling it on the .cpp file exactly like main window but with a few differences. As you can see, I have the constructor and destructor, and it's inherited by the WX panel class, and on the CPP file I included the graphics and DC buffer.h, and also the constructor has almost the same as the main window with a few differences. Of course, it doesn't need a title nor a size. Now in the drawing panel header file, we have to create a method called onPoint, which takes in a parameter of WX paint event, reference event, and we have to call it in the drawing panel.cpp file. We have to input this blind code line inside the constructor. As you can see, I did that here. Now we have to implement the onPaint method. In order to prevent some rendering issues in Windows, we had to add the following codes to that method. As you can see here, I have implemented the onPaint method and added those two lines. And after that, we have to check to see if it failed as necessary, and in order for that to happen, we have to add this simple line of code: if context return. That way it checks if it fails or not, and I added that, implemented that here, as well as adding a context set pen and set brush into a different color for the actual box or rectangle. So that way when it's done, it shows you a black border with a white interior. Now I will show you what that looks like once I run the program right here, and after I implement the drawing panel into the main window header file. I see a private drawing panel, a pointer drawing panel, and then calling it in the main windows.cpp so it can run correctly. And I have created a few rectangles here, one in each different position, just to mess around with it a little bit. And you can see I created 5 rectangles just to show how well it worked. The grid construction part 1 area, there's a 15 by 15 grid, and in order for that we have to set the grid size on 15 by default. Go into the drawing panel header file, and you can see the grid size I put it at 15 for default. And for now, the cell width and height is assumed to be at 10 by default, so when it's called, it is calling a 15 by 15 and 225 rectangles. I have this here. This is what I used to in the beginning, and I'll show you what it looks like in a little bit. Going on into construction grid 2, the window size is at 200 by 200, but I put mine at 750 by 780, and doing the adjusting the size from 20 to 30. You can see right now the cell size, I have it at 10, and I will go ahead and run this program so to show you what it looks like. Right here it's a 15 size 15 grid size 10 with a cell size of 10. If I change that to a 30 and run it, these cells will be much bigger. So when I maximize or minimize the grid, nothing changes, stays the same. Now I have to create two variables outside the loop for the height and width, and these values will be calculated by dividing the grid size, the panel width divided by the grid size. And as you can see, I comment this code out because I made a new code implementing that, and when I run this program, it'll show me the grid maximizing with the window as well. Right here, do the equation and still have the same for loop as I did in the bottom, but with the difference of having the panel width divided by grid size instead of just each cell individually. When I run this program, it gives me the same output, but once I maximize the grid, everything is bigger in a sense, and when I minimize it, it goes back to normal. Now I'm hoping that I can go into this new week fixing that graphical error towards the end and have a better working program with a better visual on the grid.